Okay, let's get started with our one color brioche swatch. I have 15 stitches on my needle and I have used the long tail cast on method. I'm going to slip the first stitch. The next stitch is slip one yarn over, for which I have to bring the yarn forward, slip one means slip the stitch from left needle to right needle purlwise, yarn over. So my yarn is in front of my needle. I do a yarn over and then I'm ready to knit the next stitch. See that the yarn over has created two strands over in the previous stitch. That's what you want to happen. So again, slip one yarn over. For slip one yarn over, I bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch from left needle to right needle, bring my yarn over the slipped stitch and the right needle, and then I'm knitting the next stitch. Again, slip one yarn over, bring yarn forward, slip the stitch from left needle to right needle, bring yarn over the slipped stitch and the right needle, knit the next stitch, slip one yarn over, slip one yarn over, knit one. Okay, yarn forward, slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, then knit one. The last stitch is always knitted. It's the edge stitch, so knit one. So this is how my needle looks after the setup row is complete. So you can see that some of the stitches are like double stranded. Those are the stitches we slipped. What we did is we slipped the stitch and also gave a yarn over to that stitch. So this is probably the most unique thing about brioche, that every stitch will have an associated yarn over. Okay, right now only one half of the stitches have yarn over them. Eventually every stitch will have a yarn over associated with it, and that is what makes brioche different from regular knitting. All right, so let's proceed with our row 1 and row 2 instructions and then see how the fabric is developing. Turn your work. Now, row 1 instructions, the edge stitches are always going to be, this is a slipped stitch selvage edge. We are working for this swatch. So the first stitch is going to be slipped in every row and the last stitch is going to be knitted. Okay. The rest of them are worked in a brioche pattern. So the first is row 1. For row 1, slip 1 knitwise. First stitch is slipped. The second stitch is a bark stitch. Now bark stitch is the name of the stitch is actually brioche knit. Brioche knit is abbreviated into BRK or bark stitch. So this is nothing but knitting the two strands together. We slipped a stitch in the previous row, we slipped and we also gave it a yarn over. So now we are going to knit that slipped stitch and its yarn over together, which is called the bark stitch. That is bark 1. Now this stitch doesn't have a yarn over around it. We are going to slip it and give it a yarn over. Slip one yarn over, bark one, slip one yarn over, brioche knit one, slip one yarn over, brioche knit one. See, slip one yarn over, brioche knit one. So every time you complete a brioche knit stitch, your yarn is going to be behind the needle. So bring it forward, slip the next stitch, yarn over, the yarn goes behind, ready to knit the bark the next stitch. Slip one yarn over, bark one. So we reach the last stitch of the row, which we are going to just knit it. So this is one row complete. The stitches are not going to show themselves clearly until we complete at least 4 rows. So let's do the next one. This is row 2. Again, slip the edge stitch away, and then the first stitch is like a purl stitch. It does not have a yarn over around it. So I'm going to give it a yarn over. Slip one yarn over and bark one. Slip one yarn over, bark one. Slip one yarn over, bark one. So every time you complete a knit stitch, your yarn is going to be behind your work. So bring it forward and then do a slip one yarn over, bark one, slip one yarn over, bark one, slip one yarn over, one, slip one yarn over, and then the last stitch is just going to be knit. So this is 2 rows complete from our swatch. I'll turn the work and go to the row 1 again. This is our 3rd row, and we are going to repeat just the row 1 instructions. The rhythm of the stitches gets established really quickly. The stitches themselves in brioche knitting is not that hard. I'm doing a bark one and slip one yarn over. The slip, like I said, the stitches themselves are not that hard. You can easily get into the mindless knitting mode with them. But there are other things that makes it a little bit tricky. We'll talk about it in a minute. Bark one, knit one. Okay, this is 3rd row complete. Slip one yarn over, mark one. One of the things to keep in mind is about the edge stitches. Where I talked about the edge stitches being slipped stitch selvage for this swatch. Whenever you read a brioche pattern, make sure to find out what kind of edge stitches they are using, and try to be mindful of the edge treatment every row, because that can really sometimes trip us up and throw the pattern off. Sometimes it gets confused. One strand from here or there gets confused for a slip on yarn over or something like that, and it throws the pattern off. To be very, very clear about your edge stitches and to be able to read your knitting is probably the trickiest bit in brioche. And once you have that clear, brioche knitting is going to be a much better experience. Now our stitches are beginning to show a little bit, so let's pause and take a look. So what we have here right now is the knit columns, and there are purl columns alternating each other. The knit columns basically look like the knit stitches, and how many stitches you have going on in the knit column, it is that many rows you have knit in this brioche fabric. 1, 2. There are 2 knit stitches in our in all our knit columns right now. The same thing is going on the other side of the fabric. There are 2 knit columns on each of our, there are 2 knit rows, I'm sorry, in each of the knit column in our fabric. This means that we have knit 2 brioche rows. Actually, from our swatch instructions, we did 4 rows. We did row 1, row 2, and then we repeated row 1, row 2 again. That makes it 4 rows. But you can see that in the fabric there are only 2 rows. This is because brioche is essentially also a double-sided fabric. How that happens is the first time, the very first row, we basically split the stitches into 2 groups. We slipped one group of stitches and we knitted only one group of stitches. From then onwards, the fabric is kind of divided into 2 groups of stitches, where each pass we only knit half of the stitches, and we come back and knit the second half of the stitches in the second pass. So it actually appears like we are executing 4 rows, but we have only done 2 brioche rows. So always when counting brioche rows, you count the knit stitches appearing in the knit column, and that is how many rows you have knitted. This is true for either you are doing 2 color brioche or 1 color brioche. This is the characteristic of brioche fabric. So let's get going with the fabric. Slip 1. I'm doing it continental style, so some of us can benefit out of it. Knit 1, slip 1, brioche knit 1, slip 1, brioche knit 1, slip 1. I hope my fingers are not in the way. Slip 1, brioche knit 1, slip 1, brioche knit 1, slip 1, brioche knit 1, knit 1. Edge stitches are always knitted. And now this is 3 brioche rows complete. Let's look at the number of stitches as well on the needle. We started off this swatch with 15 stitches. It appears as though a lot more is going on currently, but we have to remember that always on the needle, one half of the stitches are going to appear with their yarn overs. So the stitches that has a yarn over around them, they are counted as 1. The stitch and its yarn over is counted as only 1 stitch. That means we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 stitches. See, all of these double stranded stitches are to be counted as one stitch. So as you can see, the execution as such of the brioche stitches is not really that hard. What makes this complicated is the double knitting that is happening, the slip-on yarn overs, how to count your rows, the way you count your rows and the way you count your stitches, everything is different from regular knitting. These are the things one has to get familiar with to get more confident about brioche knitting. So let me knit one more row and probably finish this swatch. Let's talk about some terminology as well. So some patterns, when they talk about slip-on yarn overs, they call them yarn forward slip-on yarn overs, because we are doing the action of bringing the yarn forward and then slipping the stitch, and then I do the yarn over and and it is ready to knit the next stitch. But suppose if your next stitch is a purl stitch, sometimes it will happen that your next stitch will be a purl stitch or a brioche purl stitch. So you will do a yarn over and bring it forward again, so that you can purl the next stitch, which we are not doing in this swatch, but yeah. So to differentiate the slip-on yarn over, two different movements in slip-on yarn over, some of the patterns call it in two different terminology, but it is the same stitch basically. And then also when naming the rows, like in this swatch I have called it row 1 and row 2, but I also tried to explain how they are not two rows but one row done in two passes. So some of the patterns will use row 1A, row 1B to indicate that it is the same row but done in two passes, that's another kind of terminology that goes around. So various so people try to explain it in different ways, but the stitches are fundamentally the same. It's good to understand and be aware of the different terminology used around this stuff, and so I hope that gives you a little bit more confidence in your brioche knitting. Let's go ahead and bind off this piece. I'm just going to use a regular bind off, nothing fancy. The only thing to remember is the two strands of the slip-on yarn over stitches are to be treated as one stitch. We don't want to bind off each strand separately, that will look weird. So we treat them as one stitch and knit the two strands together whenever we come across a slip-on yarn over stitch. Otherwise it's just a regular bind off. Bind off. Oops. Knit the two strands together and bind off. As in any other knitting, keep your bind off stitches and your cast on stitches really loose. You might want to go up a needle size to achieve a loose bind off. So that's how it is looking now. For brioche knitting, it is advised that you choose a needle size which is smaller. For example, I'm using a 4mm needle for worsted weight yarn. My go-to needle for worsted weight yarn would be a 5mm needle. So I went down one number. So because the brioche stitches are lofty and thick, and you want them to remain like that. You don't want all the yarn overs to be sloppy and big and the fabric to be loose overall. So that's the idea behind going down a needle size. There you have it. That's the finished edge. So this is little one color brioche swatch. I really tried to slow down and explain all the explain what's going on basically. Even though we made only a small swatch, I tried to I hope the video has been helpful to explain some of the basic concepts, because I believe this is what will help in knitting more advanced stitches confidently. That's being able to read your fabric and understand what's going on. That will help. And also to fix mistakes, unfortunately, if they happen, they do tend to happen, to be able to fix mistakes. This is the basis for all that. So I hope it was useful in some way. Okay, so leave a comment below, like this video uh, if you thought this was useful, and if you're going to follow this and make your swatch, please post your swatch in the group or in Instagram and tag me. And see you in another video soon, and happy knitting until then. Bye bye.